you go? 2 heads, certainly. Ah, and a tail. Yang yin. Two tails, one head, yang yang. Two heads, one tail, yang yin. This is the trigram con water. Two heads, one tail, yang yin. Three tails, old yin. Two tails, one head, yang yang. Our bottom trigram will be read as broken, solid, broken, which again is con water. Kan is deep water, flowing and formless. He is the complement of Li, dark where Li is bright, unconscious to her sharp lucidity, and represents a more fluid, intuitive, and emotional way of perceiving. This is danger, exposure and solitude, and the need to respond with courageous self-reliance when confronted by the haunting unknown. Water is the middle sun, situated in the north, associated with midwinter and midnight. Our top or outer trigram for our primary hexagram will be read as broken, broken, solid. This is Gen Mountain. The mountain is still. It is a limit where you must stop. Gen brings each cycle to an end, defining a space where we can recognize, assimilate, and complete our experience. He creates a personal still center amid change, where we can retreat for perspective and a firm foundation for new growth. He is well-grounded, confident, and of independent spirit. He is still and knows. Mountain is the youngest son, child of maturity. In the cycle of directions and seasons, he is the northeast, late winter, approaching spring, the pivot between cycles. We got this one last time. Gen Mountain above Kan water. Give us the hexagram 4. I believe that's darkness. Our changing line 5, once it transforms from an old yin to a young yang, we'll change our top or outer trigram, to broken, solid, solid. This is dewy, lake, or marsh. Or is it Xun, wind, or wood? Yeah, Xun, wind, or wood. Xun is both wind and living plants. Whatever penetrates, spreads, and grows, shaping itself to the space available or shaping that space to its own nature. She is a responsive flexibility, sensitively improvising and adapting. Like the wind, she can always find a way through because she never creates any resistance. And so her influence is subtle and gradual, but far-reaching. In the family of trigrams, Xun is the eldest daughter, gentle and submissive. She belongs to the southeast and to late spring and early summer. Xun, wind, or wood above Kan water. Give us the supporting hexagram of 59. We'll get the titles to our hexagrams from I-ming's Taoist I Ching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It's nice and alchemical. Like hexagram 4. Our primary hexagram I-ming calls darkness. Starting yin convergence, making unruly yin submit, integrating with the world, yet preventing mundanity from taking over. Negatively, it represents obscurity, unknowing. Positively, it represents innocence. Also represents stopping in danger. And 59, our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. I-ming calls dispersal, confusion of yin and yang, followed by reordering. Got this one recently too. We will start by getting cards and the images from Kibi's I-ming Tarot. She calls Hexagram 4 youthful folly. I don't know why that's such a weird image. Youthful folly, knowledge, ignorance, self-education, learning. The attitude of someone with little knowledge, such as a child, willing to learn of their own volition in the dim light. Active attitude to learn. Again. And 59. Pardon. Dispersal. It's been a little while, but I think it was 2 readings ago-ish. 59. Dissolution. Oh. Yeah, I guess she calls it dissolution. Dissolution, dispersion, reunion. This compares the solution of a difficult problem to the way the wind scatters water. People who share the same aspirations naturally come together by breaking free from collusion and familiarity. And next we will look at Hilary Barrett's I Ching, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future, which is a nice introductory I Ching commentary, but still quite profound. When we approach the hexagram, the I Ching, to consult the oracle, the question we bring to it will always have the general context of how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time. Hexagram 4, not knowing. Key questions. What don't you know? What if you didn't need to know all the answers now? How can you learn from experience? Oracle. Not knowing, creating success. I do not seek the young ignoramus. The young ignoramus seeks me. The first consultation speaks clearly. The second and third pollute the waters. Polluted and hence not speaking, constancy bears fruit. Not knowing literally means being covered over, like a young animal hidden away in the undergrowth by its mother. So you are ignorant and cannot see as far as you would like to, but this is not such a terrible thing while you are still so small. To be small and ignorant is a creative, harmonious way to engage with your world, and holding steadily to not knowing, and hence to learning, will bring good results. But this flow from creating success to constancy bears fruit is interrupted when the young ignoramus goes running after answers as if it were embarrassing not to know. In his anxious persistence to show he shows a profound disrespect for his teacher and also for the answer he is seeking that he imagines can be had so quickly. So the I who speaks here gives one clear answer and then may refuse to answer. Or perhaps there is just such confusion that no answers can be understood. That speaker can be another person you're asking for a response you need. It can also be the oracle itself or what speaks through it. Image. Below the mountain, spring water comes forth, not knowing. A noble one nourishes character with the fruits of action. The pure spring rises under the shelter of the mountain. It doesn't know where it's going, yet its flow becomes steadily deeper and stronger. In the same way, a noble one nurtures personal character and strength with the fruits of going forward and taking action. Learning comes from experience, not in the form of ready-made answers. Sequence. Not knowing follows from hexagram 3, sprouting. Things that are newly born must needs be ignorant, and so not knowing follows. Not knowing means ignorance and the youth of things. You are at an early stage of development, like an infant just beginning to toddle out into the wider world. Suddenly you find yourself ignorant. The world is a much less orderly place than it appeared from the cradle. So if you have a confused sense of losing your center, this is a sign that you're seeing the world more clearly than before. And our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. 59, Hilary Barrett calls dispersing. Key questions. Where and how can you be less rigid? Where were the walls in this situation, and what can you see as they dissolve away? As energy and vitality is liberated from old boundaries, where will it go? Oracle. Dispersing, creating success. The king assumes his temple, fruitful to cross the great river. Constancy bears fruit. It is as if a great thaw brought the floods and everything solid were swept away. All the walls, whether they divided, contained, or sheltered, are gone. The familiar landmarks have vanished down the river, and there's a clear view for miles over free-flowing waters. Perhaps this liberates the vital energy of the situation. Perhaps it is utterly disorienting. Definitions, dividing lines, agreements, bonds, established patterns of life and thought, all these can be dispersed, their solidity revealed as an illusion. All that holds things together now is the constancy of the flow itself. The king assumes his temple. He draws near and enters it, and takes on his most important role as the people's connection to spirits and ancestors. This can also be an inner process, centering your inner authority in your spiritual home, letting your decisions flow from that essential underlying source. With this reconnection, it becomes possible to cross the great river, which has already come to you. The dissolution of the old forms releases energy into new purpose and direction, staying true to the deep connection through the temple. It's good to make the commitment and venture into the unknown. Image. Wind moves above the stream, dispersing. The ancient kings made offerings to the highest to establish the temples. Wind moving above the stream stirs and disperses it as water vapor, reminiscent of the fragrant steam that arises from the offerings and nourishes the spirits. This is the real substance of things, the inner flow of committed offering, the message and influence spreading outward. What is established with offerings will endure, while what is built of rock crumbles away. What are you building on? Sequence. Dispersing follows from hexagram 58, opening. Rejoicing and hence scattering it, and so dispersing follows. Dispersing means spreading out. Active, joyful communication and exchange naturally loosens things up and tends towards complete dispersing. Full visibility with no boundaries, distinctions, or focus. Pair. Dispersing forms a pair with hexagram 60, measuring. Dispersing means spreading out, measuring means stopping. Dispersing has no limits that would stop its flow, yet eventually this liberated energy will flow on into new, more organic forms. Yeah. 2 readings ago, we got dispersal as a supporting hexagram with exhaustion as the primary. And then last reading, we got darkness as the primary hexagram with wind 57 as the supporting. Kind of interesting. Next, we will look at Liu I-ming's Taoist Te Ching, which he wrote in 1796 as a Taoist adept. It is alchemical in nature. Hexagram 4, darkness. In darkness is development. It is not that I seek naive innocence. Naive innocence seeks me. The first augury informs, the second and third defile. Defilement does not inform. It is beneficial to be correct. Explanation. Darkness means obscurity and unknowing. In the body of the hexagram, mountain is above, with 2 yin advancing under 1 yang. Water is below, with 1 yang fallen between 2 yins. Both have forms of yin injuring yang, therefore it is called darkness. As for the qualities of the hexagram, danger is within stillness. There is danger, yet ability to stop. This includes the meaning of stopping darkness. This hexagram represents starting the operation of yin convergence. The hexagram follows on the previous hexagram, earth. Earth means going on the path of submission and receptivity. Carrying out yin convergence means returning recalcitrant yin to submission. After the primordial yang in people culminates, conditioned yin arises. The original spirit is obscured and discriminatory awareness does things. One drops the real and recognizes the false, using intellect mistakenly, producing all sorts of cleverness. Though overtly there is light, inside is really dark. This is where darkness comes from. Once you have entered darkness, essence is disturbed and life is destabilized. In a single day, you are born 1,000 times and die 10,000 times, not knowing how to stop. This is most perilous. If you know there is danger and are able to stop it, silencing the intellect, being as though ignorant and dumb, though you be without knowledge outwardly, inwardly you really have knowledge. From false darkness you return to true darkness. Thus it is that in darkness there is paradoxically a way of development. The best development of darkness is innocence. The darkness of innocence unconsciously follows the laws of God, tranquil and unstirring, yet sensitive and effective. All actions flow from the fundamental essence. This is the dignified status of a sage, the aspect of the celestial human. Those who travel the path of darkness must go back to the darkness of innocence. Only then is it the darkness that is returning to the origin. However, this darkness of return to the origin is not a matter of seeking naive innocence oneself. It is naive innocence that seeks oneself. Not seeking innocence oneself means that it does not come about by formal effort and is not attached to forms. Innocence seeking oneself means that it comes naturally and does not fall into voidness. Not clinging to forms, not falling into voidness, not material, not empty. Since it is not a matter of seeking the real, one does not exclude the artificial either. Ever calm, yet always responsive yet ever calm. It is not darkness, yet resembles darkness. It is darkness, but actually not darkness. External things cannot enter inside, thoughts cannot arise. One does not seek reality, but reality is here. But this path that is neither form nor void has 2 methods, nurturing darkness and opening darkness, which should be known. When yin and yang are mixed and natural reality has not yet been injured, and external influences have not yet entered, darkness belongs to reality. It is like a first augury when the yarrow sticks are not yet divided, surely giving direction at first. One should be open, calm, sincere, and serious, thereby going on the path of non-contrivance. Once yin and yang have divided, there is a lack of natural reality. External influences creep in, and darkness winds up in falsehood. It is like when the yarrow sticks are messed up after 2 or 3 auguries. Without awaiting their directions, one may change arrangements, thus going on the path of striving. The path of non-contrivance nurtures the darkness of reality. The path of striving transforms the darkness of falsehood. Nurturing reality, transforming falsehood, striving and non-striving are to be used according to the time and situation as appropriate. One may proceed from striving and wind up non-striving, or one may succeed in striving by way of non-striving. In either case, the ultimate accomplishment is to use the highest good without evil, wholly integrated with natural principle, to go back to the origin, return to the fundamental, and revert to innocence. Those who travel the path of darkness must do so in the correct way. In our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, 59, dispersal. In dispersal, there is development. The king comes to have a shrine. It is beneficial to cross great rivers. It is beneficial to be correct. Explanation. Dispersal means disorganization and disorder. In the body of the hexagram, below is water, in which one yang is hidden between two yins. Yang being trapped by yin. Above is wind, in which one yin enters under two yangs. Yang being damaged by yin. Yin and yang do not interact. Essence and sense are separated, so it is called dispersal. This hexagram represents yin and yang being lost in confusion, then reordered. It follows on the previous hexagram, wind. Wind involves gradually entering true eternity. Because yin and yang are disordered, one progresses harmoniously to balance them. Once people's yin and yang are disordered, and essence and sense have shifted, the mind of Tao is obscured and the human mentality arises. The true sane energy is damaged and the false aberrant energy grows. This is like the one yang in the middle of water, trapped by yin energy. The primordial is concealed inside acquired conditioning. Once the primordial is concealed, its vast energy is inhibited and yin energy takes over affairs. Insufficient to do good, excessive in doing evil, inevitably leading to total loss of natural innocence. This is like the one yin of wind, insidiously arising under pure yang, subtly dispersing yang. This is why dispersal is so called. However, even after dispersal, sages have a way to resolve dispersal, which is able to reorder that which is dispersed. What is the way to resolve dispersal? It is none other than the path of progress through obedience. The only distinction is that if you go one way, obeying invading conditioning, you disperse yang, while if you go the other way, obeying the primordial energy, you foster yang. If you can reverse obedience from acquired conditioning back to the primordial, gradually progressing without hurrying or lagging, stopping falsehood and preserving truthfulness, mastering yourself and returning to appropriate order, that which is scattered can be assembled, that which is disorderly can be ordered, so that you can return to your original being. First dispersed, ending up not dispersed, there is thus paradoxically a way of development in dispersal. Those who develop this have no danger in their hearts, even when there is danger in events, are not imperiled inwardly, even when there is outward peril. They make use of the path of flexibility to travel the path of firmness, and use positive energy to transmute negative energy. This is like a king coming to have a shrine, using sincerity to summon the spirit, so the spirit can be summoned. It is also like wood following the nature of water, beneficial to cross great rivers, so that danger can be solved. When people's yin and yang are scattered, it is always because of using the human mentality and abandoning the mind of Tao. Every act, every step is on dangerous ground. But if you use the mind of Tao and dismiss the human mentality, you can seek the jewel of life in a tiger's lair. Search out the pearl of illumination in a dragon's abyss, progressing harmoniously in danger and getting through danger. With proper control according to events, whether agreeable or disagreeable, the mind of Tao is ever present. The human mentality passes away. The 5 elements aggregate, the 4 signs combine. What dispersal is there? However, in the path of resolving dispersal, there is a process. There is a course of work. There is intensification and relaxation. There is stopping at sufficiency. The slightest deviation and you go far astray. It is only beneficial if you are correct. Accomplishing the work correctly, hastening and relaxing methodically, advancing and withdrawing at the proper times, there will surely be development and benefit. And we will read our changing line 5, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself, takes precedence over all other elements, and is the most focused part of the reading. Line 5 has the general context: strength and self-determination, clear vision, being in command. Hexagram 4, darkness, changing line 5. Innocence is auspicious. Explanation: in stopping, knowing when and where to stop, being incapable, so following the capable, using firmness to balance flexibility, borrowing strength to compensate for weakness. Though dark, this is not darkness. This is the auspicious path of innocence, unconsciously following the laws of God. This is darkness aware of its darkness. Oh yeah, we will also read our hexagrams in the commentary section, which is a little bit more alchemical in nature often. Darkness, mountain above, water below. Under a mountain, a spring is produced in darkness. A superior person nurtures character with fruitful action. Darkness means developmental nurturance without intellectualism. Above is mountain, below is water. Here, water is referred to as a spring and not water, because the spring under the mountain is water. When a spring is produced under a mountain, the spring is nurtured by the mountain, being water with a basis, flowing far from a deep source, going through without hindrance. This is the image of darkness. What superior people see in this is that when those who practice the Tao want to exercise virtue outwardly, first they must develop character inwardly. If one acts without development, the action will have no basis. Without inner mastery, action will injure character. This is the reason for emulating a spring emerging from a mountain, acting fruitfully without obstruction, taking as a model the mountain nurturing the spring, nurturing character with caring warmth. The yang in the center of water refers to what is produced by celestial unity, the original generative energy that gives birth to beings. This is what is called the celestial virtue, or power. This virtue is hidden in the temporal. Since ordinary people follow temporally acquired conditioning and abandon the primordial, most do not know how to develop, nurture, cultivate, and sustain this primal virtue, so as a result they gradually dissipate it and harm their own essence in life. Those who awaken to this set aside acquired conditioning to practice inner development and outward action, using development to perfect action, using action to test development, cultivating both inside and outside. Nurturing character is developmental, and acting on it is developmental as well. Nurturing character means no worthy quality is left undeveloped. Fruitful action demands that every act be fruitful. Nurturance of character demands that it be nurtured until it is stable as a mountain. Only then is development complete. Fruitful action demands that it be effective as a spring flowing day and night. Only then is fruition complete. Action fruitful, character developed, one completes one's nature and understands the meaning of life, integrated with the celestial design, unconsciously following the laws of God. This is why darkness is valued. Our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, 59. Disintegration. Wind above, water below. Wind blows above water, unintegrated. Thus ancient kings honored God and set up shrines. Disintegration means scattering and confusion. Above is wind, below is water. This is wind blowing above water. The nature of wind is to penetrate, but it cannot get into water. The nature of water is to float downward, and it does not take in the wind. One another not joining is the image of disintegration. However, even though wind cannot enter water, it can go along with water as it blows. And even though water cannot take in wind, it can rise up along with the blowing of the wind. So there is also the image of resolving disintegration here. What ancient kings saw in this was that people receive their nature and life from heaven and receive their bodies from their parents. Though there may be differences in social status and differences in goodness and evil, insanity and aberration, nevertheless the source of everyone's endowments is the same. Therefore, the ancient kings honored God and respected heaven and set up shrines to pay respect to their ancestors, so as to cause everyone to know to honor God and respect their ancestors, not forgetting their roots. When the roots are not forgotten, the basis is established and the path develops. Correcting faults and pursuing goodness, manners and morals change, so that what had disintegrated can be reunited. Great indeed was the ancient king's way of resolving disintegration. If practitioners of the Tao can realize the intention of the ancient kings in resolving disintegration, respect heaven and not oppose it, requite their origins and not forget them, seek life within death, seek blessing within injury, then the four forms can be combined, and the five elements can be assembled. This then is the original self, without any disintegration. Next, we'll look at James Dekorne's Gnostic Book of Changes, which I've left links to in the description box below. It's a synthesis, essentially, of several I Ching commentaries, some of the top ones. And he has kind of a Gnostic flavor to his perspective, thus the Gnostic Book of Changes title. He leaves helpful quotes by Carl Jung and things like the Kabbalah throughout, and sums up the thing at the end. He is a practitioner of the Tao himself. Hexagram 4 he calls inexperience. Other titles might be youthful folly, the symbol of covering, immaturity, uncultivated growth, youth, acquiring experience, youthful ignorance, enveloping, folly, and darkness. A quote from D.F. Hook: often the I Ching uses this hexagram to show us that we should not be asking this question. Judgment. Leg. Inexperience means progress and success. I do not seek the inexperienced youth, but he seeks me. When he shows the sincerity proper for divination, I instruct him. If he asks 2 or 3 times, that is troublesome, and I do not instruct the troublesome. Firm correctness brings advantage. Blowfold immaturity, good fortune. I am not one to seek out uncultivated youths, but if such a youth seeks me out, I shall at first read and explain the omens. Yet should he ask me many times, he Just because of his importunity, I shall not explain anything more. The omen indicates a need for proper direction. This hexagram suggests stubbornness, the upper trigram issuing from the softness of the womb, the lower trigram. While it sometimes happens that youthful rashness succeeds where sober counsels fail, it is nevertheless the duty of the mature man to cultivate the minds of the young and to respond within reason to their requests for guidance. As an omen, this hexagram may be taken to imply a case in which a certain amount of rashness may lead to success, but in which older people are not absolved from the duty of guiding the young. There is also suggestion that the Book of Change itself, though fully responsive to those who make the right approach, will not brook importunity in the form of trivial questions or of seeking to reverse its judgments by further questioning. Whether the omen may be taken to mean that we should go ahead with some rash scheme, or that it is time for us to restrain someone's youthful rashness, will depend upon the nature of the inquiry, the people concerned in it, and the particular moving lines involved in the response. Ritzema/Karcher, enveloping, growing, in no way me seeking youthful enveloping seeking me. The initial oracle consulting, notifying, twice, 3 times obscuring, by consequence not notifying, harvesting trial. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of concealment and clouded awareness. It emphasizes that actively accepting this concealment in order to nurture growth is the adequate way to handle it. The image leg, a spring issuing from the mountain, the image of inexperience. The superior man, in accordance with this, nourishes his virtue and strives for resoluteness of conduct. Wilhelm/Baines, a spring wells up at the foot of the mountain, the image of youth. Thus, the superior man fosters his character by thoroughness in all that he does. Blofeld, this hexagram symbolizes a watery hole at the foot of a mountain amidst uncultivated growth. The superior man, by determined good conduct, nourishes his virtue. The second sentence is deduced from the first. Both are suggested by the component trigrams. Ritzema/Karcher, below mountain issuing forth spring water, enveloping. A Chun-Tzu or chief son or superior person uses fruiting movement to nurture actualizing Tao. And actualized Tao is the ability to follow the course traced by the ongoing process of the cosmos, linked with acquiring that which makes a being become what it is meant to be. Commentary, Confucius/Leg, inexperience shows the trigram of the mountain above that of the abyss. The perilous impasse suggested by these figures evokes the idea of inexperience. Progress and success are suggested because the action and development of the hexagram conform to the requirements of the time. When inexperience seeks wisdom, will responds to will. The oracle responds to sincerity because it has the qualities of the dynamic line in the central second place, but the oracle does not respond to ignorant importuning. The proper duty of a sage is to nourish the correct nature of the ignorant. Leg. Difficulty shows us plants struggling within the earth, and inexperience suggests the small and undeveloped sprouts which then appear upon its surface. This is an image of youthful ignorance, and the object of the hexagram is to show how those in authority should deal with it. The judgment takes the form of the oracle's response to the questioner. The upper trigram represents a frowning mountain which blocks the progress of the traveler. The lower trigram symbolizes a stream of water in a dangerous canyon, such as might be found at the foot of a mountain. The combination of these symbols suggests the perilous nature of ignorant inexperience. The subject of line 2 represents the oracle, who demands sincerity from the unenlightened. It is his duty to evoke the innate correct nature hidden within the questioner, to bring this quality out and develop it. In regard to the image, Chu Hsi says that the water of a spring is sure to move on and gradually advance. This may serve as a symbol of the general process and progress of education. Notes and paraphrases, judgment. Inexperience portrays the relationship between the ego and the self as one of student to master. Communication via the oracle demands seriousness of purpose. The self refuses to pander to the ego's illusions. the the ego. The superior man furthers the work by developing his will and intent. Wilhelm's title for this hexagram is Youthful Folly, which tends to lend it a negative connotation that is not always strictly applicable. However, he is quick to point out that the title should be understood to mean the immaturity of youth and its consequent lack of wisdom rather than mere stupidity. While the title of inexperience avoids the negative connotation, it must be acknowledged that there is an aura of irritation in this hexagram, which illustrates an uncomfortable truth about the relationship between the ego and the self. The self is an awesome archetype, and once one has established contact with him, he assumes a distinctly stern personality. The self will not pander to the ego's illusions and has no patience with anything but the unvarnished truth. Tact and patience are not among his attributes. Lao Tzu describes him very accurately. The sage is unkind. He treats the people like sacrificial straw dogs, which is just the way it is. As a satellite of the self, the ego complex was not created just so that it could spend a lifetime indulging its fantasies. The work must be undertaken, and the self knows more than you do what remains to be done. Like any excellent teacher, he demands more of us than we think we have in us to give. This phenomenon of the tyrannical and often unjust self has been noted in many times and places. Here is an example from Neoplatonism. A quote from Iamblichus in the Egyptian Mysteries, or Iamblichus. What shall we say in regard to the question, why do the divinities that are invoked require the worshipper to be just, although they themselves, when entreated, consent to perform unjust acts? In reply to this, I am uncertain in respect to what is meant by performing unjust acts, as the same definition may not appear right both to us and to the gods. We, on the one hand, looking to that which is least significant, consider the things that are present, the momentary life, what it is and how it originates. The beings superior to us, let me say, know for certain the whole life of the soul and all its former lives, and if they bring on a retribution from the supplication of those who invoke them, they do not increase it beyond what is just. On the contrary, they aim at the sins impressed upon the soul in former lifetimes, which men do not perceive, and so imagine that it is unjust that they fall into the misfortunes which they suffer. A contemporary expression of this idea comes from consciousness researcher John Lilly, famous for his work with dolphins in isolation tank experiments with psychedelic drugs. John Lilly. Cosmic love, e.g. the spiritual self, is absolutely ruthless and highly indifferent. It teaches its lessons whether you like/dislike them or not. By definition, the gods, archetypes, are not human. Were it possible for them to evolve without human vessels in space-time, presumably we humans would not exist. It is these archetypes in the guise of our complexes and limiting beliefs that are being altered by the work. Because the unconscious psyche is a multiverse, it is sometimes very difficult to differentiate just who is advising us, and the self, via the oracle, will occasionally test us for our ability to use intuitive common sense. Which is to say, when the gods or the self becomes totally unreasonable, we can only go along with them to the limit of our human understanding. Slavish obedience to all injunctions from the unconscious is to sell our souls outright to something that we don't understand. The renunciation of common sense is the renunciation of our most precious birthright. On the other hand, to disobey at will is to put our souls at risk. This is one of the most painful of all dilemmas. How far do we go in our obedience to unseen powers? Aspects of this problem have been called the dark night of the soul, an inner initiation, a trial by fire to see what we are truly made of. There are times in the advanced course of the work when one receives the strange insight that the self actually wants us to disobey. This ordeal can only be lived through. No one can advise you except your own sense of what is right for you at any given moment. The most useful guideline that I've found is that the precepts of the work, as found in the perennial philosophy, are consistent worldwide and constitute a reliably moral structure for responsible choice. If the oracle seems to be telling you to do something contrary to your inner sense of right and wrong, contrary to your understanding of the precepts of the work, then go with this intuition rather than the oracle. The self via the oracle will test you in many ways to make you develop. The ultimate goal is to become so infallibly intuitive that oracles become superfluous. The gods need our intelligent disobedience if they themselves are to evolve. It is in the stress between obedience and conscientious disobedience that growth takes place. In one sense, whatever choice you make, as long as it is conscious and you fully accept the consequences, is the right choice for you at the moment. We learn through our mistakes and can never fail our lessons if we truly integrate the experience into our unfolding lives. Confucius, one of the greatest teachers who ever lived, obviously took his teaching method from the judgment of this hexagram. The master said, "I won't teach a man who is not anxious to learn, and I will not explain to one who is not trying to make things clear to himself. And if I explain 1/4 and the man does not go back and reflect and think out the implications in the remaining 3/4 for himself, I won't bother to teach him again." And so it is with the oracle, the self. The deeper one gets involved in the work, the more difficult the lessons become, so that one is always kept in a position of relative inexperience. There are times when a simple answer would suffice that you will receive an ambiguous image, which, if you do 3/4 of the work, will lead you to a profound insight. In our supporting hexagram, which puts our primary hexagram in a broader context and influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all, 59, James Dekorne calls expansion or dispersion. Other titles might be dispersion, dissolution, disintegration, dispersal, overcoming dissension, scattering, dispersing, unintegrated, reuniting, evaporation, reorganization, New Deal, reshuffle, course correction, catharsis. Judgment leg. Expansion intimates that there will be progress and success. The king goes to his ancestral temple. It will be advantageous to cross the great stream. It will be advantageous to be firm and correct. Wilhelm/Bain's dispersion, success. The king approaches his temple. It furthers one to cross the great water. Perseverance furthers. Blowfold, scattering, success. The king has approached his temple, an omen of safety. It is advantageous to cross the great river or sea, i.e., to go on a long journey. Persistence in a righteous course brings reward. Lu, dispersion, success. The king approaches the temple. It is of benefit to cross the great water. It benefits to continue. Ritzema/Karcher, dispersing, growing. The king imagines possessing a temple. Harvesting, wading the great river. Harvesting, trial. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of confronting obstacles, illusions, and misunderstandings. It emphasizes that clearing away what is blocking the light is the adequate way to handle it. To be in accord with the time, you are told to disperse what obstructs awareness. The image leg. The image of wind moving over water forms expansion. The ancient kings, in accordance with this, presented offerings to God and established the ancestral temple. Wilhelm/Bain's, the wind drives over the water, the image of dispersion. Thus the kings of old sacrificed to the Lord and built temples. Blowfold, this hexagram symbolizes wind blowing across the face of the waters. The kings of old built temples in which to sacrifice to the supreme Lord of heaven. A temple is a place of safety from the ills of the world. The symbolism here is that the upper trigram forms a temple in which people are safe from the pit, the lower trigram. Its middle line 5 signifies the king. The implication is that we should employ spiritual or moral means to preserve ourselves from the danger threatened by the lower trigram. Cleary 2, wind travels over the water, dispersing. Ancient kings honored God and set up shrines. Commentary, Confucius/Lake. The dynamic line is central in the lower trigram, and the magnetic 4th line is correct in the upper trigram, uniting with the dynamic ruler above her. The king's mind is without any deflection as he goes to his ancestral temple. He rides over water in a vessel of wood and will cross the great stream with success. Leg. The hexagram of expansion denotes a state of dissipation or dispersion. It shows men's minds alienated from correctness and sure to go on to disorder. Here an attempt is made to show how the situation should be remedied. The lower trigram represents water and the upper wind. Wind moving over water evaporates it and suggests the idea of dispersion. Success is intimated because there are dynamic lines occupying the central places in the trigrams. The king's piety moves the spirits by its sincerity. When the religious spirit rules men's minds, there will be no alienation from what is right and good. Under such conditions, even hazardous enterprises may be undertaken. The second sentence of the Confucian commentary literally begins, "The king is indeed in the middle." This means that his heart and mind are set on the central truth of what is right and good. The ancestral temple signifies the recognition that sincere religious practices counteracted the tendency to mutual alienation and selfishness among men. The wooden vessel refers to one of the attributes of the upper trigram, which is wood. It suggests a boat riding on water, the lower trigram, hence crossing the great water. Notes and paraphrases, judgment. Focus on the ideals of the work and maintain your will. A major synthesis is possible. The superior man subdues his ego to attain his latent potential. Because of the intimate relationship between this figure and hexagram number 45, contraction, I've chosen the title of expansion to best emphasize their polarity. The ancient kings and sages are more mythical than historical, so we can assume that they symbolize archetypal forces, gods within the psyche, of whom the ego is only the current space-time representative, i.e., servant facilitator. The self is the focal point, the center of this multidimensional awareness complex. A quote from R. Fisher in A Cartography of the Ecstatic and Meditative States in what looks like a magazine, Science. In both timeless and spaceless experiences, the mundane world is virtually excluded. Of course, the converse is true of the mundane state of daily routine, in which the oceanic unity of the universe, in ecstasy and samadhi, is virtually absent. Thus, the mutual exclusiveness of the normal and the exalted states, both ecstasy and samadhi, allows us to postulate that man, the self-referential system, exists on two levels: as self in the mental dimension of exalted states, and as I in the objective world, where he is able and willing to change the physical dimension out there. The symbol of a temple where one worships one's ancestors may be taken as the perfect gestalt of the work as it exists outside of space-time, as well as the karmic repository of all previous incarnations. It represents both the completed work and the work in progress. That the family temple was regarded in China as symbolic of an ideal standard of perfection such as this is implied in the following passage. A quote from H.G. Creel in Confucius and the Chinese Way. Diplomatic negotiations were carried on in the ancestral temple, in the veritable presence, it was believed, of the ancestors. Diplomatic banquets were given there also. Even a proposal of marriage was received by the father of the prospective bride in his ancestral temple, in the presence of the spirits. The world of Confucius, we must remember, was one in which there was a nearly complete breakdown of moral standards. Only in the performance of religious ceremonies could there still be found, consistently, a type of conduct regulated by a socially accepted norm of behavior, in which men's actions were motivated by a pattern of cooperative action, rather than swayed by the greed and passions of the moment. Psychologically, expansion depicts a state of inner pressure capable of fruitful resolution if it can be properly guided. The king in the image, in this case the ego, sacrifices for a high ideal, the good of the work. Legg's commentary tells us that the second sentence of the Confucian commentary literally begins, "The king is indeed in the middle." This suggests a combination of his second and third sentences into the paraphrase, "The king steers a middle course when crossing the water to the ancestral temple." This gives the image of a vessel and the proper way to guide it toward a destination. Anyone who has ever steered a boat with a rudder knows that to overcorrect on either side is a mark of poor seamanship. The goal is to maintain a dynamic balance in our guidance of the work. Lines 2 and 5 represent proper course correction because they are both in the middle of their respective trigrams. Expansion is the inverse of the following hexagram of restrictive regulations. What is there confined and hoarded is here dispensed. But this dispensation must conform with the ultimate good of the work. Not just any release of tension will do. It must recombine itself into a new and better organization, as imaged in the fourth line. If this new order is a proper one, the released tension precipitates a catharsis, as imaged in line 5. A quote from E.C. Whitmont in The Symbolic Quest. The form, then, in which our complexes confront us is the form in which the fundamental materials of our human structure come into our here and now existence. Like crystals, they are always imperfect to some extent, and often unrecognizable or grossly disfigured in comparison with the ideal shape, the shape that would represent the pure incorporation of the crystal scheme. But we have to meet them in this more or less imperfect or distorted form, and out of this form, we have to transform them into something that may be more akin to the aboriginal intent inherent in their archetypal cores. This undertaking, this process, is what Jung calls individuation. Suggestions for meditation. The judgment of hexagram number 45, contraction, also mentions the king going to his ancestral temple. A close comparison of this figure with expansion will reveal much about the dynamics of the work. Next, we will look at our changing line 5 of our primary hexagram 4, which puts a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here some places you may find yourself, takes precedence over all other elements, and is the most focused part of the reading. Changing line 5 as the general context, strength and self-determination, clear vision, being in command. In experience, hexagram 4, changing line 5. Leg. The fifth line magnetic shows its subject as a simple lass without experience. There will be good fortune. Wilhelm/Bain's childlike folly brings good fortune. Blofeld. Youthful innocence brings good fortune. Here, the Chinese text suggests that we are dealing not with youthful folly, but with the innocent misdemeanors of quite small children. Lu. The youth submits, good fortune. If you receive this line, you can expect to attain your goals easily. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. Her good fortune is due to her docility going on to humility. Wilhelm/Bain's. The good fortune of the childlike fool comes from his being devoted and gentle. Blofeld. This is because such conduct coincides with what is soft and gentle. Ritzema/Karcher. Yielding uses ground indeed. Cleary 2. Harmonizing smoothly. Wu. This is due to his docility and humility. Leg. Line 5 is in the place of honor and has for its correlate the dynamic line in the second place. Being receptive, it is taken as the symbol of a simple lass, willing to be taught by its dynamic correlate in line 2. Notes and paraphrases. Su. The unassuming youth seeking instruction with humility gains good fortune. Wing. An attitude of innocent acceptance in regard to seeking advice from others will be rewarded. Good fortune. Editor. As so often in the I Ching, the full meaning of this line is found in the relationship between it and its correlate. The second line is the dynamic sage, and the fifth line is the magnetic receptive student. As the ruler of the hexagram, line 5 exemplifies the idea of receptivity to instruction necessary for the evolution of ignorance into gnosis. This is the relationship of the inexperienced ego to the omniscient self. A quote from T.H. Huxley. Sit down before fact like a little child, and be prepared to give up every preconceived notion. Follow humbly wherever and to whatever abysses nature leads, or you shall learn nothing. James Dekorne breaks changing line 5 down into 2 possible succinct definitions, A and B. A, awaken the mind by fixing it nowhere, Zen proverb. And B, accept your ignorance and inexperience and humbly devote yourself to comprehension of the work. We will now get a randomly card-drawn chapter from the Tao Te Ching while summing up the reading. Again, I will say that we received Hexagram 4, our primary hexagram, darkness, last reading, and we received the supporting hexagram, dispersal, as a supporting hexagram as well, the reading before that one. So it's interesting that they both come back around so soon, almost emphasizing both of them. Not only that, we received changing line 5 last reading as well in hexagram for darkness. But we also received changing line 3, which was inauspicious. So we had one inauspicious line and then an auspicious line. In this, we only have an auspicious line. So there's a kind of sense that we have made some progress, or maybe the right decision. And that being, since we're focused on the changing lines right now, moving from, I suppose, the changing line 3, which had a woman that you were not to interact with because their main concern was they would lose themselves if they were around a rich or wealthy man. And so it wouldn't be good to take that one in marriage. So it's almost like this concern for status and for self-advancement or ego advancement has been swept away by our supporting hexagram 59 dispersal, where the floods come in and knock all the walls down. And the king enters the temple and offers offerings to the Supreme Lord of Heaven, is what it says. In this, because we have changing line 4, where there's that idea of the line being a student to the sage of line 2. He's also in the position of the king, the ruler. So it's like the perfect situation where the good part of our primary hexagram darkness, of that innocence or youthful ignorance, it says that it's auspicious though, because it calls it more the youthful misdemeanors of very small children. Is that what he called it? Give me a moment. What we're dealing with here is what he says. Yeah, I know it said that, but where it said it. Basically, it's not a negative thing. It's like that Fool card, I suppose, where sometimes not knowing, and accepting that not knowing is the best way to learn. It's like continually holding on to that idea of not knowing. And that means that you're always in a state of not really being firm and resolute as to your idea of what should be done in any given situation. It's more like you meet that situation with a fresh mind and with the mind of an innocent child. And those two concepts tied together, where darkness already has that, and then in the changing line, it emphasizes that even more closely, or highly emphasizes it. And then you have the image in our supporting hexagram dispersal of the king entering the temple. It's almost like you have this child king entering the temple who is taking advice from the sage, or the higher self, in line 2. And so it's actually kind of profound. The walls have been swept away by the floods, and it's like the waters of the unconscious and how they're handled is without the structures of any kind of culture or system that might try to maybe restrict or confine their expression. More so, it comes into the realm of this childlike innocence that is free from such perspectives and is able, therefore, to flow with the times more freely. And being that they are taking guidance from the sage of line 2, this childlike king element entering into the temple is very auspicious. We could have that be an image within each of us of not the idea of a king that is already believes they know everything, but like the idea of the king being like a child just entering in with all these walls being knocked down and this space being offered. It's like offering spaciousness to the moment and allowing the not knowing to be like a gift in a way. That the gift that we offer to the moment is to not be assuming and be open to learning. To read chapter 65 of the Tao Te Ching, I am going to switch it up today. We'll probably read from Jia Fu Fang in Jing English, but I picked this copy up of the Tao Te Ching from Benjamin Hoff. It's pretty incredible. He seems very well studied into all things I Ching related, or Tao Te Ching related. 65. Simplicity. The rulers of ancient times who were skilled at following the way did so not to enlighten the people, but to hold them to the state of simplicity. The people are growing difficult to govern because they are much too clever. For that reason, he who governs with cleverness is the despoiler of the state. He who governs without cleverness is the benefactor of the state. He who knows the previous two principles knows, moreover, to examine patterns. To always know to examine patterns is what could be called profound virtue. Profound virtue is deep, far-reaching. It enables all to turn back to simplicity, and to thereby then regain the state of great cooperation. We'll also read it in Jia Fu Feng and Jane English. Slightly more poetic. Maybe a little less exact, potentially. 65. In the beginning, those who knew the Tao did not try to enlighten others, but kept them in the dark. Why is it so hard to rule? Because people are so clever. Rulers who try to use cleverness cheat the country. Those who rule without cleverness are a blessing to the land. These are the two alternatives. Understanding there is primal virtue. Primal virtue is deep and far. It leads all things back toward the great oneness.